County. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest today on this day after the day after, our post-election show, I have Alex Ruff, who is MP or MP-elect or re-elected MP, depending on how you want to phrase it, for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. Alex, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Thanks so much, David. It's great to be back.
And congratulations. It was a very interesting race, if nothing else.
Oh, it was definitely an interesting campaign, a little bit different than 2 years ago.
Yes. Now, we'll get to that in a minute, but I just wanted to say nationally, somehow some people are referring to this as the Groundhog Day election because the number of seats being held, Liberals 158, Conservatives 119, Bloc 34, NDP 25, and others, which is the Green Party 2, although that could change because of one of the situations regarding a former Liberal candidate. That's what it was at dissolution. So deja vu all over again?
Yep. For a couple of those seat changes, you can do the math different ways, but if there's a 2-seat change, then you could make the case that each of those MPs, were worth about $300 million each, or if you even say that there's about a 10 seats, back and forth, just in different ridings, switch it around. All right, then you give the benefit of the doubt that maybe it's only about, $60 million per MP that got elected.
Well, we could also be charitable and say that it cost every Canadian a little over $16 for the election. So that's what, 3-4 double-doubles?
Yeah, well, I know Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound would have sure loved $600 million for rural infrastructure or high-speed internet. We could have got a lot done with that amount of money. No question. Now, this riding, it would have to be considered what is called a safe seat at this point in time. One of the interesting things I learned along the way is that there are about 113 ridings across Canada in the House that are considered safe seats, and that's where the candidates took about more than 30% of the vote. So this would qualify. You had nearly 50% of the vote this time around, which was also an increase over the 2019 election, which I thought was very interesting because very briefly the Liberals took 24.8% of the vote, the NDP 13.7%, and the People's Party 8.2%. Was the People's Party showing any surprise to you, at least in this riding? No, not at all. I mean, I was a little, I guess it'd be fair to say, frustrated at times when I talked to different people because I knocked on their doors, even if they had a PPC sign up. And unfortunately, I didn't get to a couple of them until after the advance polls. And by the time I finished talking to them and they actually understood our policies and not what was sort of being shared via social media or what they had read somewhere or heard somewhere from a friend, they went, oh, that isn't the way we understood it, and maybe I would have been able to retain their votes. But at the same time, from talking to other candidates and some of reading some of the analysis, there's only likely about a third of those PPC voters that are traditional conservative voters. There's a number of them that are former Green or NDP voters, maybe even Liberal voters, and a third that were first-time voters maybe that had never voted before. And so obviously, this election had a number of issues that they were comprising. It wasn't just about the economy moving forward. The pandemic and certain decisions being made by the different provinces all had impacts on the election results here. And that's always the challenge, is making sure voters understand during an election whether or not it's a provincial or federal jurisdiction, or even some cases municipal jurisdiction. So that's part of I think the opportunity of elections is to educate Canadians and make sure they understand sort of where different jurisdictions overlap.
Did you find, well, you alluded to it a moment ago, but did you find that the impact of social media in spreading information that wasn't always entirely correct significant in your canvassing?
Not. I don't know if it was social media because I didn't ever ask the people I was talking to at the door where they heard what. Like I always ask them, please provide the reports or the links if they were questioning something or wanting to show something to me. Please email me where you got this from or prove it to me in the article or the whatever that you have. But I can't really, to be fair, judge where they get their information or who they got their information from. I can speak with certainty when I'm at the door of what our policies were, and it's all backed up, available in widely recognized public media. And if not, always take you're talking to the candidate, and so that's the benefit of the candidates getting to the doors as much as possible, because then they're getting it directly from the horse's mouth or whatever other part of the horse that you want to associate it with, versus rumor mill or via whatever other source that's out there.
And I think the other thing, too, is that Mr. O'Toole made a very clear point that the party platform was always there for reference, and that I noticed in a couple of the public appearances, he always had a copy of the platform in hand. And so that he was, he could say, here it is, this is what we stand for. So that was very, very clear that it was present.
Yep, no, and that's the one thing that made it a lot easier as a candidate, was having the platform released on day one of the election and having that 163 pages ready to go. The challenge was early in the campaign, having fully understood and absorbed the whole platform myself, because that's the other challenge when you have that much detail, that much policy, and the whole platform out on day one. It's a lot to absorb yourself, even as the candidate. So there's lots of good stuff there, and but the voters made their decision. I mean, I'm very humbled to be given the opportunity here locally, but ultimately didn't go the way I was hoping on the national side.
Right. And I noticed that while there were changes, that there wasn't a lot of changes. Now, as you move forward, do you think that there'll be opportunities for new MPs? Will there be opportunities for new experiences for other MPs who are returning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of the time, every party will switch up roles that you do in the House, different committees you sit on. If you go back to even the last Parliament, I had an opportunity to sub in quite frequently onto the Defense Committee or even the Ag Committee. So there's all those opportunities are there. You just need to ask. All the, when you're in opposition, the shadow ministers are very keen to get as many people and different MPs involved in the process, especially if there's something going on or a key witness or somebody testifying at committee that impacts your specific riding across the country. It's great to get those people in there, because then they can speak with a level and ask questions that pertain to their constituents, and that means a lot more, not only to them but to their constituents. And it actually helps flush out legislation a lot better when you have those ground truth cases that you can be talked about and asked about during the legislation review process.
Sure. Now, let's just go back to the campaign for a minute, because I did want to ask you, were there any experiences which stands out in your campaigning?
I don't think so. In the end, we just kept plugging away. It was a shorter campaign and made it a little bit more not challenge, I guess challenging a little bit for just getting out to the doors and making sure we're following all the public health guidelines. But ultimately, I don't think there was any one thing that stood out this time compared to the last time. I mean, obviously, having gone through it once, that makes it a little bit easier to understand where the challenges are and what we needed to do. And I guess the only thing that stands out more than anything is just how fast we ran out of election signs. I had to order 1,500 more bag signs and 100 more big 32 by 48 inch signs, and those 100 big signs were gone within a few days of them showing up in the office, and we were only halfway through the campaign, really. So that was I guess the biggest surprise, was just the demand for people wanting to advertise that they were supporting me, and I greatly, I'm so grateful for that support.
It's interesting you mentioned signs because I know that signs are not a cheap a cheap item. They're certainly very useful. I also was I correct in seeing that you used some signs from your first campaign as well?
Oh, I absolutely. I mean, I'm a fiscal conservative, David. I'm not going to buy signs. They're not cheap and they've gone up in price. There's nothing wrong with the old ones. The logo changed slightly and it says elect versus re-elect, but I mean, it's the same thing. I still want to get elected, whether that's on there or not. So as long as you're getting your name out there, I think it passes the message.
Well, I guess you'll have to rent a storage locker for storage next time, won't you?
Well, I mean, I had them all from before. I own my own little storage mill. So my brother helped me out a lot last campaign, and we built. It's a slick process. They're all ready to go, all inventory. We're gathering them up right now. A great number of volunteers. I think I got about 70 people across our great riding here that help me with the signs in particular. So it's like anything, you can't be successful as a candidate without a great team around you and a great team of volunteers.
Well, let's touch on that for a moment because I don't think people realize how many people it actually takes in terms of volunteers to run a campaign. How many people did you have in total?
Well, we had, now whether everybody participated or not, but when we made some phone calls and asked anybody how they were willing to help out or volunteer in some capacity, we had a list of over 170. Now, in the end, there's only about 15 absolutely key people that are involved almost on a daily basis. But as I said, it was likely greater than in the 50 to 70 range for those that, filled an important role. But ultimately, whether somebody came in just to help answer phones at the campaign office for 2 hours, or whether it's just somebody putting signs up or helping take signs down, every part is key to getting reelected, and you can't do it without them.
Sure. I think that's the one piece that people don't realize is that it's not the candidate, it's the people who are behind the candidate who make the candidate look good. Sorry, Alex, I know you look good anyway.
100%, David. Hey, with a face like mine, you got to get all the help you can get.
Sure. And the other thing I would add for anyone who is interested is that if you work on a campaign, it is really interesting experience because you are exposed to working in the broad electoral process. And having done it myself, it's quite interesting if you have any interest at all in how our government works.
No, absolutely. And I think in particular, all the volunteers that were working right up until election night till, midnight or 1 a.m. on the scrutineers for the vote counting. That's a unique thing that you're actually seeing how the final step happens and how fair it is and how, what's the right word, transparent the whole process is. So I think that's absolutely key, especially in a democracy.
Yes, that's a very, very good point, Alex, because one of the things that each party is allowed a scrutineer in each poll. Now, there are very strict rules on what you can and can't do as a scrutineer, but as a volunteer, you can sit and watch and verify the count as it happens. So unlike other countries who shall remain nameless to protect the guilty, sorry about that, but you know what I mean, is we can actually, a citizen can, if they volunteer through a party, can actually sit and watch the vote count. It's very, very transparent, as you say, and there ain't no shenanigans, so to speak.
No, we're very fortunate to live in a country like Canada where we do have that transparent process.
And the other thing is that just to go a little bit deeper into that I believe a scrutineer has the right to ask a question or challenge a ballot because they are shown the ballot if there's any question. I mean, 99% of the ballots are just fine because most people appropriately mark, but as a scrutineer, you get to see that ballot that is questioned and you can keep your own track and make sure that everything's on the up and up.
Yeah, and I'm talking to one of my scrutineers there on election night, especially near the end, what was taken once they got into the advanced polls. He was down in Hanover, and it's like they count them twice, right? So there is, it takes a while, especially with the advanced polls that had an average poll might have 300 voters in it, and a lot of them, varied where it was in the riding. Sometimes the count is, even a lot less. Some of the polls maybe only had 100 people vote actually on election day because there are a lot more advanced polls, but the advanced polls get amalgamated, and there's a lot of polls that get put together for into one advanced poll, and so some of them were a couple thousand votes. So having to go through that twice is obviously a lot of work and a lot of time. And again, kudos and thanks to all the scrutineers and volunteers for all the parties that chose to help out and participate and be part of the democratic process.
Absolutely. And I would also say that it's also worth mentioning for thanks to all the people who worked for Elections Canada. They made the system work. And I know this year they had issues around staffing. They had fewer polling places, perhaps not as didn't have as much impact here in Grey Bruce, but it certainly had an impact in other parts of the country, in some of the ridings, particularly in urban areas. But that's another way citizens can get directly involved in our democratic process, is to work in an election for Elections Canada. And pays pretty good, and you can really have a hands-on experience. You're tired. You're very tired, but it's certainly worthwhile. So you had that was your team, and that was they got you where you needed to be.
Absolutely.
So now that you're where you have been elected to, when will you have to be back in Ottawa? Has that been made clear yet?
No, it hasn't. I saw something in the news there, I think yesterday, that I think Elections Canada has until, if they had to the 11th of October to verify the official results. And Parliament can't really do anything until all the candidates have been officially verified, or at least enough of them, I guess, to recall Parliament. And so I'm thinking it'll be after Thanksgiving weekend before we actually resume in the House. Work's already started, obviously, within the caucuses and within the respective parties. I'm not sure if Aaron's going to recall and do a caucus meeting before we all have to be back in Ottawa or not. I did talk to him. He gave me a phone call yesterday, so I did have a brief conversation with him, but we didn't talk about when we'd all be back to Ottawa yet.
Right, because that first, you were a part of that first caucus meeting, of course, in 2019. What's that first caucus meeting like?
For me, obviously, and unfortunately, I couldn't even sit through the whole thing when it got really exciting. I had to step out. I had a family commitment that I couldn't get out of. So I missed the exciting part of it, I guess, which got into some of the more blunt sort of assessments. But because when you fail to form government, there is obviously lots of frank discussion about what went right, what went wrong. But the first part is very much eye-opening for any new MP. A lot of just getting reacquainted too, because there's a lot of MPs that are returning, and people, because it happens after the summer recess, so it's 3 or 4 months since you've seen your colleagues. So there's a lot of a lot of process just to talk about the different things and the way things are moving forward. And then obviously the election aftermath discussion. So I have a feeling it'll be, they planned, I think, 2 hours last 2 or 3 hours in 2019. I think it ended up going 5. So it'll be interesting to see how long this one is. I know I'll make sure my schedule is completely free for the duration, because I think I'll just plan, if it starts at noon, I'll plan to be out of there by midnight, and that'll likely give me enough time to make sure that there's no other conflicting issues.
So is that when the what shall I say, the lessons learned exercise happens, at least, or is that just sort of hashing things out?
Yeah, I think it's just the first step, right? I think, I don't know, I can't speak for other parties. I know our party takes it serious. I know Aaron will take it very serious, based on his background as well, that, you have to do that. If you're not going to learn from what went right and what you need to sustain and what didn't go right for you as a party, then you're kind of missing the boat on what you need to consider and do. And so I think that's just the way it is. And, and sometimes, it involves frank conversations that need to happen because not everything goes perfect. Everything never goes perfect in life. So you got to figure out what went right, what went wrong, and ideally just not identify it, but learn from it.
Sure, sure, and get past the blame game and into the true lessons learned, and saying, hey, yeah, we all messed up on this one, so let's do better next time and see what we can do better.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, your caucus will be, and part of that caucus meeting will, aside from getting to know you, you won't do things like committee assignments. Everybody will get it'll be an orientation process as well.
Yeah, there won't be any committee assignments other than maybe a couple key ones, but those are really the ones tied around how Parliament functions itself. And some of those will be based on leadership positions and key positions like the House Leader, et cetera. Some of that stuff needs to be determined right away because they're the people that sit on the board of internal economy and help make decisions going forward and confirming the exact number of MPs from the different parties and what the composition is. So there's a few small things. The first thing our caucus has to do, and similar to what the first thing that once the House actually resumes is, for us, it's assign our caucus chair. So we do that by vote. It'll be interesting to see. Tom Kimmich did a phenomenal job as our caucus chair over the last 2 years, but he's a very principled process guy that doesn't think it should be somebody doing it for more than one parliamentary session. So he's indicated he will not seek that position again. And so we'll have a new caucus chair by all accounts. So that's the first thing we need to do. And so the people that chair the meeting is actually the deans of our caucus, which I believe is Scott Reed and Cheryl Gallant as the longest serving MPs. So one of them will chair that meeting until an actual caucus chair is assigned. And then it's almost the exact same process in the House of Commons. The first thing we need to do is choose a Speaker of the House. And so the different MPs that are seeking that position all get a chance to speak, I think, for only 2 minutes, make their case, and then it goes to anonymous vote by all MPs in the House to determine who's going to be the Speaker. And one important thing that they do brief you on during your training, and they remind you at that first caucus meeting, that you have to opt out, not for that, because if you forget to opt out, your name is on the ballot or as somebody that's going to run to be Speaker, and they will then give you your 2 minutes. So for a brand new MP, that if you mess that up, you don't necessarily want to be put on the spot in your first time in the House of Commons. Hey, now, please, Mr. Ruff, deliver your 2-minute speech on why you think you should be the best Speaker of the House. That can be a little surprising to some if they haven't followed the rules and done that. And I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure Mr. Palmadin, I might have his name misspelled incorrectly, but he's the Dean of Parliament, and I'm pretty sure he sought re-election and was re-elected. I think he's been there going on, I don't know, 30 years. Like he's been there since the 80s, I think. And so he
succeeded Stanley Knowles, I think.
So he's been there a long time. So it's always entertaining to see. And I think because he's actually chaired the speaker selection now for, I think, 5 parliaments already or something. So being the longest serving MP in the House of Commons, currently still active. So I'm pretty sure he's still there. So he's a fascinating gentleman.
Well, the other thing is that when the Speaker is elected, they are dragged forward from the back of the House or from the door of the House to the chair, which is an old parliamentary tradition based on the fact that to have been Speaker of the House of Commons in the British tradition was worth your life 400 or 500 years ago.
Yeah.
So you're not anticipating being dragged to the chair, Speaker's chair.
I will not be putting my name forward, David. It really does. One of the unique things you need, and although I am capable of speaking French, I think it's important for the speaker to have a pretty strong grasp of their second language, but to give kudos to our former deputy speaker, Bruce Stanton, that was our deputy speaker for a couple parliaments. He did a phenomenal job. It's somebody that needs to understand the procedural aspects of the House, but you need to work on your, you need to have a strong enough, capacity or capability.
Yes.
The words slip in my mind right now.
No, you're trying to transliterate in your mind because you were looking for the French word, right?
Yeah, so you need to have a strong enough grasp of your second language, so to fill that role to the best of your abilities, I think, because then it makes it easier, because you're constantly switching back and forth and addressing MPs. And the other thing is people with good memories, because the good speakers and deputy speakers are those that actually know, because that's how you refer to everybody, is by their riding name. And so even though they have a little cheat sheet, a lot of the speakers are really good at identifying, without looking at that, which riding and who's from there. So it's a unique skill unto itself.
Yes, because some of the riding names are quite long. I mean, Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound is not too difficult, but there is one in Manitoba. I think it has 4 separate names to it. It's just outside of Winnipeg, Headingley. It includes the community of Headingley, and it's quite complex. So, anyway, that's one of those little things for the speaker. And then we've got, once the speaker is elected, we've got things like the speech from the throne. Which would follow relatively quickly, will it not?
Yeah, normally, I can't remember if we go back normally on a Wednesday, if they set the first day. That's sort of what my memories, what I'm thinking of, that we went back for that first day in the House on a Wednesday, and then normally the speech from the throne is delivered that Friday. And we had 2 of them. We had one there in the pandemic after the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament last summer. For whatever reason, I'm still trying to understand why he did that. But we did have that second speech. So that second speech from the throne, I'm assuming it'll be somewhat similar this time around due to the still ongoing pandemic and health guidelines that we follow, is that it won't be quite the same as the first one, where a lot of people all head over to the Senate and gather around, and it was like not even standing room only. Like, it's so you're jam-packed in there to watch and listen to the speech from the throne. So this last time we all sort of did it from the House itself. A lot of us just sat or from because not everybody was in Parliament last September when after the second speech. A lot of people were just watching it from Zoom or on CPAC.
Sure, because that will be the COVID restrictions that are in place for the House will continue for a while yet, I expect.
I'm assuming that'll get negotiated. I mean, we do follow, because the House of Commons obviously does exist within the province of Ontario. We do try to follow the provincial guidelines and health measures, although technically the House of Commons is exempt if we wanted to be from a lot of those guidelines. It's a privilege of being sort of the highest House in the parliamentary body in Canada, that we do have that ability to actually supersede some of those things. But at the same time, we never have, that I'm aware of. We actually follow those guidelines because, again, we want to make sure everybody's staying safe and that we're within the guidelines that have been set by the province.
Well, that's why it's called the parliamentary precinct. So anyway, Alex, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and have further conversation about what's ahead, and maybe a little look back as well. But we'll talk about what's ahead and where we might be in a while. So friends, I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
My name is Matthew Rutledge. I'm a 60 Scoop survivor, born in Red Lake. Was adopted from there to Toronto at the age of 4. All of our brothers and sisters, family members got separated from each other. That was the government's goal, to break that connection from brothers and sisters. Basically taking the Indian out of the child. Right now, they're still trying to find themselves. Originally, my birth name is Harvey Halverson. In my high school days, teens, I was trying to fit into society. I knew I was First Nations, but I didn't know who I was inside. I think later in life, I started that journey. I am proud, Anishinaabe man, of who I am now. I love life, who I am.
Focus better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest is Alex Ruff, MPP MP for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. Alex, my apologies. Welcome back. Good to have you here.
Great being here, David.
Now, well, I guess let's. What are the other things that we've got on the list of things that we can expect? Will be a budget. Do you think we'll have a budget before Christmas, or do you think the government will delay it?
I don't think they actually have to deliver a budget till the new year, because the budget, my understanding, again, I'm not the expert on this, but because the budget normally just comes out in the spring, that's when it gets passed. So I don't think we'll see a new budget until the spring time frame. Normally it's February, March that they try to bring the budget forward, because the budget that was passed is for this fiscal year. So I'm pretty sure everything goes ahead. And again, don't want to make too many snide partisan remarks, but I mean the last time this current government likes to wait a couple years, it seems, between budgets anyway. So we'll see what they do. Again, their track record on delivering on time with budgets isn't great.
What might we see a financial statement? You know, one of those financial updates then.
The estimates have to go through. There will be they will get voted on. It'll be, I think, about a month in. I know we did last year and the year before. Like it's before Christmas. There is definitely an estimates and motions to confirm that the budget's still on track. Any readjustments that they want to do upon what was approved ahead of time needs to go through the process, and those are all important votes. And they're actually, from my understanding, all votes of confidence as well.
Which leads me to another point, the vote of confidence. In our Canadian parliamentary system, the government of the day is always within one vote of confidence or vote of non-confidence of falling. We're in a minority government situation. No one is how shall I say it? No one is promising anything at this point. It appears that the NDP and the Bloc are sitting back and taking stock of the situation. No one's made any commitments. And will those conversations be happening as well?
Oh, I'm sure they will be. To be frank, though, I mean, we did have a couple of the, public statements made in the last parliament that I think would still somewhat be applicable. I mean, ultimately, the NDP were very public in their leader that they will continue to support the Liberals' legislation while the pandemic's ongoing. So as long as there's a pandemic ongoing, the NDP have been crystal clear, and I haven't seen them take that statement back. So I don't see why they would stop doing that moving forward, with any vote of confidence. So there's that. I mean, we did have another motion that everybody voted on almost unanimously in the House of Commons. That was that the government won't call an election during the pandemic either, unless it was through a vote of non-confidence. But that promise or indication obviously wasn't followed by the government when push came to shove this summer when they called the election. So again, it's up to it is what it is, but basically it's a reset with the new parliament. And so, as you said, all those things need to be discussed and debated, and a lot of that is done in, sort of to set the ground rules going forward. But ultimately, any piece of legislation can be declared, I believe, confidence, although we were surprised last year, during the last session, or a couple times, where traditional non-confident votes or non-confident pieces of legislation were declared votes of confidence by the government. So again, it's really the government can make those decisions, and they then have to defend that in the House or in public. If they put something forward that, for whatever reason, they're keen on, or that they want to push forward as their priority, and if they want to declare a motion of confidence or vote of confidence, well, then they can do that. But if Canadians believe them or don't believe them, I mean, ultimately would happen if it is defeated when you go to the polls. So we'll see. Prime Minister's already on the record having stated that if he didn't get his majority, he was planning on calling another election within 18 months. So we'll see if he keeps that promise or what he decides to do going forward.
Well, I note that Mr. O'Toole also acknowledged that we may be back doing this in another 18 months in his press conference yesterday, just the day after the election. So who knows? We may have Groundhog Day 3.
Yep. Well, let's hope not.
I'm sure, because I suspect if the mood of Canadians hasn't changed, there will be some serious accounting done. People will get things, have to just step back and take a serious accounting of where things are.
And look, I'm still hopeful that the current government, re-elected government, will recognize the need to work together collaboratively and put forth legislation that all parties can agree upon. That to me would be the ultimate sign of a successful government, if they're working that collaboration and cooperation behind the scenes before the piece of legislation ever gets tabled. But even then, once it does, when it goes through the process and it gets to committee, that everybody works together so that we're passing the best legislation for all Canadians. We're not dividing Canadians. That's the biggest struggle I think we're facing right now in this country. Is unfortunately, over the last 6 years, the country has become more divided, and we need to get ourselves back to being one unified country. As I've stated countless times before, been all over the globe, we live in the best country in the world. I really want us to make sure we stay there, and I really, that's an onus on all elected officials, all elected MPs, regardless of party, to really work. But at the same time, the government has the privilege, by being elected, to drive the legislative agenda. So they're the ones that get to draft and write that piece of legislation that hopefully will get support. And ideally, if they do it right and they do it with every Canadian in mind, it should get, a lot more often than not, unanimous support in the House and not have these split votes.
It has been said by some commentators that the core takeaway from this election is that Canadians are saying we want minority government to continue. And that is perhaps a shift that we haven't seen recently, at least, because I remember in the 1960s, the Liberals went through a series of minority governments under Lester Pearson because because there was cross-party support, particularly from the Creditists and the NDP, that they were able to make it work. But at the same time, what Canadians seem to be saying today is, look, get your act together, give us the kind of country we want, and make it work, make the minority government work. And it's that, dare I say it, Canadian compromise coming to the fore?
Who knows? As you know, I'm still relatively new to this, and I'm just a big believer in let's doing the right thing and trying to, bring forth the best legislation possible and not make it divisive. Just let's put good legislation forward that everybody can see the benefit to. We might not always agree on every aspect of it, but let's work together. I think that's a key message, and I'm not going to disagree with you about whether or not this is what Canadians want going forward or not. It's what Canadians ultimately decided, and as lots of politicians before me have said, the people are always right. So it's the way it works.
I remember Larry Miller saying exactly those words many times on this show. He would say, at the end of the day, the people are always right. So you're following a good quote, that's for sure. What legislation would you anticipate coming forward? Any idea what we might expect in terms of legislation?
No, not really. I mean, obviously, we just have to look at the Liberal platform to get into it. And to be frank, I mean, I haven't memorized their whole platform. I was doing that with my own, but that is something that I will, make sure I'm up to speed on now, because ultimately I'm a big believer in holding leaders to account and holding the government to account. That's our official mandate that people forget all the time. You get a little bit of pushback sometimes with the constructive criticism that you try to offer. But when you look up the role of the official loyal opposition, it is to actually challenge and every piece of legislation the government puts forward to make sure it is the best piece of legislation. So obviously in their platform, I'll get smarter on that to make sure that they're the ones that won the right to form government by Canadian voters, and therefore they should be held to account to deliver on their party platform and what they want to deliver on, at least for those parts that we agree upon. We can definitely hold them to account for that. The ones we disagree with, well, then of course there should be no expectation that we'll necessarily support those measures because that's just reality. So it'll be interesting. I'm hopeful that we're going to see some key legislation come forward that's going to help the constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. I want to see stuff on affordable housing, that's going to make it worthwhile for all Canadians and more accessible to especially our younger generations, but not just them, or seniors, especially those on single incomes or sort of dependent upon their pension, OAS, GIS, etc., that they have access to affordable quality housing. That rural infrastructure becomes a bigger priority. Is something I'm going to push for, is rural infrastructure and more support to all of Canada, not just our major urban centers. Rural high-speed broadband or high-speed internet. We need more of this, and we need a program out there to do that. So they've said that they're going to speed up their current plan for that. So I'll definitely be holding their feet to the fire on that issue. Meat processing, that's something that I don't anticipate they're going to bring forward, but I think it is something that we do need to push, and I'll push, and I know a lot of my colleagues will be pushing that represent rural ridings, especially in Eastern Canada, the need for increased meat processing capacity to help our farmers in particular, and across multiple, not just in our cattle, but with the swine, with our turkeys, chickens, sheep, etc. We need more meat processing capacity. And finally, labor shortage, right? There's something else that's a huge issue. I mean, it's a different challenge in different ridings, but in particular here, us in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, we have a huge labor shortage challenge across all sectors. I've heard that right from hospitality, tourism sector, to the auto industry, to the ag sector. So there's lots we can do, I think, and hopefully the legislation that will be forthcoming can help address this. And if not, these are issues that I'm going to be pushing for with the government.
Yeah, I think that all of those issues were certainly in the election campaign, and I guess it is your response. It is your responsibility to hold the government to account on all of those issues and many more. With the approach of National Truth and Reconciliation Day at the end of September, do you think will there be any pressure on the government to move towards more work on reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples?
Well, I definitely hope so. I mean, they had promised in 2015 to make sure there was clean water in all our reserves by March of this year. Unfortunately, they failed to deliver on that. So that's something that they better bring forth more, the necessary steps and support, because that's something that every Canadian, regardless of your background, but in particular Indigenous people, should have access to clean drinking water. So that needs to be a priority. As you saw on our platform, and I know all the parties agree on the necessary steps, in particular, I can't remember the exact numbers, whether it's 74 through 91 or something like that, or 74 through, anyway, the specifically tied to the residential schools, and some key steps that can be taken there to implement to help with the reconciliation process. So they're all important things. I know I have to reach out to the new chief of Nawash, because I haven't had a chance to meet her yet. So that's something I'll be trying to tee up here in the next couple of weeks is a face-to-face or maybe a virtual meeting with the new chief, because I worked on my relationship with Chief Najawan when he was there, and obviously with Chief Anaquat over in Saugeen. But I think that's the key thing, is to make sure that the doors are open and we have that relationship. But I know they had their election just prior to the writ being dropped, and I didn't get the opportunity during the campaign to actually meet with her. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Is there anything that you'll be doing on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation?
I know that's next week. I'm optimistic. I've received one invite from the Friendship Center here, the Indigenous Friendship Center here in Owen Sound, to attend that. So I'm ideally going to attend that if the schedule allows it. It's what's been block booked in there. The only thing that I think could interfere with that is if we get recalled to Ottawa prior to next Thursday. But if not, that's what I intend to participate in, or unless the chiefs reach out and there's another event that maybe is more pertinent or more valuable. I guess valuable is the wrong word, but that would take precedence over me attending something maybe at one of the reserves themselves.
Sure. Just if I can just add a plug here, that I hope everyone who's watching will take advantage of some time for reflection, but also if it's possible, attend one of the events in your community, because this is the intention of the day, and we hope we can at least be more mindful of the issues surrounding Indigenous relationships and the Truth and Reconciliation process, which is going to be ongoing, to be sure. Now, Alex, to go back to what will happen in Ottawa, you were deputy whip when you were in the last House. Do you anticipate coming back as in that office again, or will that be up to the leader?
That'll be up to the leader. I actually have no idea. He's still considers me part of his leadership team, but I'm sure there will be some changes within the team. There always is. But who knows? We'll wait and find out. I mean, I'm more than willing to serve and do my part as part of the team wherever I'm needed. I've made that crystal clear to Aaron right from the get-go, is put me where he best sees fit. And as long as he's not putting me somewhere I totally disagree with for whatever reasons, then we can have that debate or have that discussion. And I mean, that's the beauty we live. It's not like in the military where I'm following orders. It's being asked to sit in certain roles, and I'm more than willing to just be part of the team and do what I can to make a difference.
Sure. So there may be an announcement later on, as after the House goes back in, and early on there may be an appointment, or there may not be.
Yep, and normally those decisions are released even just a bit prior. Not all the committee stuff necessarily, but we'll see. Yeah,
and just to go over again, you were the committees that you served on when in the last House were which?
Well, so it was Veterans Affairs Committee there for that first, not quite a full year, obviously, once the pandemic hit, but I was technically on the Veterans Affairs Committee from, I think, December of 2019 to August of 2020. And then when Aaron took over the leadership and made me the deputy whip. I've been the deputy whip ever since, so I officially, the only committee I sat on was the Joint Interparliamentary Committee, which is an important committee because we're the ones that sort of make the decisions for any of the interparliamentary associations that are in existence. There's about, 50 of them, sort of providing the guidance and directions for them. One of the things we've had to decide on and is international travel for those groups. Some of them obviously are fine. They go to countries where there's appropriate, safety protocols in place, but some of them it's a bit wider and broader. And again, not putting our parliamentarians and their staff at risk have always been a concern. And then again, having access to all the virtual resources. So we've had to make some tough sort of decisions, but it's more of a governance committee. And then, so those are the only two formal committees I've sat on. However, I have subbed in on defense, on agriculture. Trying to think, there was one of the other ones that I think I maybe subbed in briefly on as well.
So those kinds of things will be continuing. You just will wait for the leader's call.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, for your staff here in Owen Sound, in your office here in Owen Sound, will the public see any changes?
Nope, no. None of them have decided they're retiring or moving on or anything like that. So they've never stopped working, right? Once Parliament was dissolved, obviously I wasn't in the office. I could to sign, their for my part-time employees that they're working on call. If they work some hours, I could sign their pay sheets kind of deal to make sure they get paid. Anything that's directly involved with supporting constituents, we could do a little bit of that, but in reality, I couldn't use the House of Commons resources for anything during the RIP period and during the campaign. So I think I was into the office physically once in the 36 days of the campaign, and that was more just to grab my a suit jacket that I'd left here before the night of the chamber debate here in Owen Sound. I think that was the only day I was actually into the campaign or into the MP office, but my staff never stopped working to support constituents' issues with CRA, immigration, Service Canada, etc. So there was lots to keep them busy, and not as quite as many emails coming into the Constit office in that period, because most of them are more questions and policy type questions that needed to be driven to me. So our out of office or the staff would kindly remind anybody asking those type questions to contact the campaign office if they wanted an answer on where I sat on a certain policy or platform issue.
That's an important point to remember, is that when you're in an election campaign, the government actually goes on to what's called caretaker status, using what's called the caretaker convention, and that applies right to the MP's office. You can only deal with certain, as you say, important issues like dealing with government departments. And everything else, you can't use the resources of your House of Commons office for election purposes.
100% correct. And in reality, we're no longer even the MP with Parliament being dissolved. The government, more than anybody, retains a certain capacity, because we still need a government. But as you said, they're in caretaker status, but they still retain their title of Prime Minister or Minister during the campaign itself, during the RIP period. But the rest of us, technically, we're no longer MPs because there are no MPs in the House once Parliament's been dissolved. There is no Parliament. So it's, as you said, there's certain things that we're allowed to still do to support Canadians and support our constituents, but we're technically no longer members of Parliament.
Sure. You're an ordinary citizen again.
Yeah, you're a candidate seeking office.
That's right. So it sounds like it's going to be a very interesting fall, and as always, for those of us who have an interest in politics and political matters, it's still going to be exciting.
Life's always a challenge and always interesting. I mean, if I wanted to do something less exciting, I wouldn't have jumped into politics.
Well, I was just looking at the banner you have above your head regarding for your service and Operation Inherent Resolve, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is probably a little quieter than that particular assignment, the one you used to wrap up your military career.
Yep, definitely a lot less different challenges. I'll just say that. I can't complain. I've lived a very exciting life, and I think I'm privileged that way, and I'm always up to the challenge.
Now you'll be dividing your time like you were in the last period of
parliamentary.
Parliamentary period to you spending time in Ottawa, but also back in the constituency. Is that right?
Yep. No, the parliamentary calendar is set in stone, basically. I mean, it hasn't really fundamentally changed. The weeks may vary a little bit, but I think since the 80s. So the rule of thumb is there's at least 1 week every month that's a constituency week where MPs are back in their riding, back most weekends. And then obviously at Christmas time, there's normally it's about a month that there's a break. Some months there's 2 weeks of constituency, and the House normally sits from the September to, obviously we won't be back until October. But until June. It follows the school year very closely, so it allows us to sort of focus that way. And then all summer, I mean, I haven't been to Ottawa since Parliament broke in June, right? So it's great being home this whole time and not having to do that trip back and forth. It's a long drive, in particular during this pandemic, right, where I wasn't flying at all or trying to break it up, which breaks it up a little bit. Doesn't really save you a lot of time, but does break it up when you, instead of doing a 7-hour drive, you're just doing the 2.5-hour drive from Toronto up to the riding.
Sure, sure. Well, we've got about 4 minutes left, Alex, and I know you wanted to express your appreciation to a number of people. So I'll give the sort of last word to you.
Oh, thanks so much, David. And again, it's no different than sort of my comments made on election night. I just want to really reiterate to everybody out there the importance of your team. I owe a deep level of gratitude to my campaign team. They were phenomenal. You can't do it without that great team of volunteers and your family's support. So my deepest gratitude to all of them, in particular to Carol, my campaign manager. She's the Energizer Bunny, and she just keeps working and working. And again, trying to get her to stop is a challenge unto itself. As well, I just want to recognize the other candidates. It's never easy putting your name forward for public office, and they all deserve their kudos for putting their name forward. It's a huge sacrifice personally, and you got to be willing to accept some warts and some hits kind of deal from people, because not everybody's going to be happy with you as for the party, more the party. I don't think there was anything ever personal, and I do truly appreciate the last two campaigns that with all the candidates has been so respectful of each other's viewpoints and just never personal. We can attack each other's policies or platforms, but never make it personal. So I appreciate that professionalism and the sacrifices the other candidates made. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all the constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, but obviously those voters that voted for me and allowed me to return as their member of parliament and to represent this great riding in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. It's truly humbling to be given that privilege and be given that opportunity to again represent everybody in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Well, it looks like it will be an interesting fall, an interesting winter, and an even more interesting spring. So I think we're all kind of waiting on tenterhooks. Everyone will catch our breath, and there'll be lessons learned from the election and from the campaign, and we look forward to seeing what will, how shall I say it, what will emerge from the House of Commons. And we really haven't talked about the other part of our parliamentary system, which is, of course, the Senate, nor we have a new Governor General. We've got about 2 minutes left. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that we have a new Governor General who will be probably reading the speech from a throne. And we can expect, I presume, not just English and French, but also some Inuktitut as well. So it'll be a very interesting experience to watch with our new Governor General as well.
No, absolutely.
Oh, by the way, I learned something today about what former Governor Generals do in elections.
What's that?
Well, the last Governor General actually worked as a deputy returning officer in a riding in Quebec. So it was kind of interesting to see that. And she was quite honest. It was a very interesting experience. So I suppose, Alex, there's always room for yourself. If you ever decide you're not going to go to politics, you can always do something at election time.
Well, we'll see. Well, when I'm done with this, or when the people are done with me, we'll see what I choose to do next.
Exactly. And that's what makes politics so exciting. Friends, this has been Politically Speaking, kind of the final wrap up to our election series of shows. And we're back into our regular schedule next week with the Bruce-Grey Catholic School Board representatives. But thank you to Alex Ruff for his conversation today. And Alex, I'm sure we'll be talking again in a few weeks. Thank you again. And thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. We'll talk again.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Each member is chosen